The sky over the city was gray and heavy as soldiers marched through the streets carrying their banners high. The sound of boots hitting the ground echoed against the walls, and the people watched from behind broken windows. In crumbling doorways, Earth had been under the control of the Empire for many years, and every world in the Empire had once agreed to keep it this way. The Council had said it was for the good of the galaxy, but the truth was seen in the faces of the hungry and the tired. In the capital far away, Queen Laura Kane sat in her grand hall wearing armor of silver and gold. She had power over every colony, and her word was law. Her rule over Earth was strict, and she had no pity for those who suffered under her command. She believed strength kept the Empire together, and that mercy was weakness. Her advisors stood near her, speaking of small uprisings in the lower cities of Earth, but she waved them away as minor trouble. In the tunnels beneath New York, a young man named Alex Hunter moved through the shadows with quick steps. His clothes were worn, and his hands were rough from hard work. He led a small group of fighters who had sworn to resist the Empire. They had no great weapons, only stolen rifles and a few old vehicles. But they had courage. Alex had seen his family taken away years ago. God, the memory. And the memory drove him to fight on. No matter the danger. That night, the group gathered around a small fire hidden deep underground. They spoke of the supply depot outside the city. It held food and medicine guarded by a small unit of soldiers. If they could take it, they could help many families who had nothing. Alex planned each move in his mind, knowing that one mistake could cost them all their lives. Far above in the palace, Queen Laura walked to her balcony. She looked out over her shining city with its tall towers and bright banners. She thought of the reports she had read. The resistance was growing, but she believed they could be crushed before they became a real threat. She ordered General Adam Pierce to increase patrols and send more troops to Earth to put an end to the trouble once and for all. As night fell, Alex and his fighters moved through the ruins toward the depot. The moon cast a pale light over the streets, and their footsteps were silent like shadows. They reached the fence and cut through it, moving quickly before the guards could notice. A shout broke the silence, and the first shots rang out. The fighters pushed forward, returning fire and forcing the guards back. It was a short fight, but the rebels won, taking the supplies they came for. In the palace, the news reached the queen. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. She saw this as a challenge to her power, and she would not allow it to grow. She told her advisors that the people of Earth needed to be reminded who ruled over them. Her orders were clear: more soldiers, more control, no mercy. Alex and his group returned to their hideout carrying bags of food and crates of medicine. The people in the tunnels came out to greet them with smiles and quiet cheers. For a moment they felt hope. Again, Alex looked at the faces around him and knew the fight was far from over. Also knew that the victory tonight would bring more danger tomorrow. Far away, Queen Laura sat alone in her chamber. She thought of the young men and women who defied her rule. She thought of the worlds that had stood beside her when Earth was chained to the Empire. She felt no guilt, only the weight of her crown. She believed that fear would keep the worlds loyal and that Earth would never be free. But deep inside the tunnels of New York, Alex Hunter believed something different. He believed that courage could spread from one heart to another, and that one day the chains on Earth would break. He looked at the supplies they had taken and felt a spark of hope burn stronger. He would fight again and again, until the day came when Earth stood on its own. The morning air over the ruined streets was cold as Alex Hunter stepped outside the tunnel hideout. The city was quiet, but he could feel the weight of danger hanging in the air. The raid on the supply depot had given the people food and medicine, yet it had also caught the full attention of the Empire. Soldiers were now searching the streets more than before, and checkpoints had been built at every main road in the palace. Queen Laura Kane stood before a large table covered in maps. General Adam Pierce stood beside her, pointing at the marked areas showing resistance activity. He spoke of patrols that had been attacked and supply lines that had been cut. The Queen listened with narrowed eyes and gave orders to send fresh troops from nearby worlds. She wanted the resistance crushed before it inspired more people to rise. Far below the city streets, Alex met with Claire Morgan, a young woman who carried a small camera hidden in her coat. She had been sending secret broadcasts to outer worlds, showing the suffering of Earth. Her images were dangerous because they told the truth, and truth was something the Empire feared. She told Alex that small protests had begun in other cities, on distant worlds, and that the people were starting to question the council that ruled over them. That night, Alex led another mission. This time the target was a convoy carrying weapons to a garrison near the coast. The fighters moved in silence through the ruins, waiting for the right moment. As the trucks rolled past, they struck hard, blocking the road and forcing the soldiers to scatter. The battle was fierce but quick, and the convoy was taken. The weapons would help the resistance hold their ground against the growing number of Imperial troops. Back in the capital, Queen Laura heard of the convoy attack. She felt a flicker of anger that the resistance had struck again. She ordered Adam Pierce to go to Earth himself and lead the fight. She trusted his skill and loyalty, and she believed his presence would break the will of the rebels. Adam accepted the order without hesitation, but deep inside he wondered about the truth of the Queen's rule. He had served her for many years, yet the stories from Earth stayed in his mind. When Adam arrived on Earth, he saw the damage with his own eyes. Streets were filled with rubble, and the faces of the people were thin and hollow. He walked past families huddled and broken buildings, and for the first time, he began to question the cost of the Empire's power. Still, he carried out his orders, increasing patrols, and searching for the rebel base. Alex and his fighters knew the danger had grown. They moved their supplies deeper into the tunnels and set traps along the old subway lines. They spoke little, but each knew that the fight was becoming harder. Claire continued to send her broadcasts showing the faces of the hungry and the wounded. Her work reached more worlds, and the anger against the Empire began to spread. One evening, as the sun set, Alex climbed to the top of a ruined building. From there, he could see the city lights of the Imperial command post in the distance. He knew Adam Pierce was inside planning his moves. He also knew that the battle for Earth was no longer just about survival. It was about showing the galaxy that Earth would not remain in chains forever. In the palace on the distant world, Queen Laura received new reports. Some worlds had begun to speak against her rule. A few governors had even refused to send more soldiers to Earth. She called her council and demanded obedience, reminding them that her power came from their unity. But deep inside, the first seeds of fear began to grow. She had seen empires fall before, when unity was lost. On Earth, Alex prepared for the days ahead. He looked at his small band of fighters and saw their resolve. He knew they faced an enemy with greater numbers and better weapons. Yet he believed that courage and hope could turn the tide. He told them that every act of defiance, every small victory, would echo across the stars and one day force the worlds that supported their chains to beg for forgiveness. The wind carried dust through the streets as Adam Pierce walked among the people. He saw soldiers taking food from merchants and children watching in silence from the shadows. The orders from the Queen were clear, but his mind was not. He had been loyal for many years, yet something inside him began to turn as he saw the truth with his own eyes. Alex Hunter stayed hidden in the tunnels, watching the movement of the patrols. He knew Adam was now on Earth, and that meant the Empire saw the resistance as a real threat. He told his fighters to be ready for anything. The days ahead would be harder than before, but they could not stop now. Claire Morgan moved through the ruins with her small camera, capturing every sign of suffering. She filmed the faces of mothers holding sick children and the streets lined with rubble. Her broadcasts reached faraway worlds, and messages of support began to flow back into the hidden networks. The Empire could not block every signal, and the truth was finding its way to people who had once believed the Council's lies. In a quiet meeting under the city, Alex spoke with two soldiers from a border world. They had come to Earth under orders, but they did not agree with the Queen's rule, they told Alex that unrest was spreading across the Empire, and some worlds were refusing to follow every command. They offered to pass messages and supplies through secret routes in the outer systems. Back in the capital, Queen Laura sat at the head of the council chamber. Governors from other worlds spoke in careful voices about the rising anger among their people. Some warned that supporting the heavy rule over Earth could lead to trouble on their own planets. The Queen listened without showing fear, but she knew the pressure was building. Her eyes moved from one governor to another, and she reminded them that unity was the shield that kept the Empire strong. Adam returned to his quarters late at night, unable to sleep. The images of the people stayed in his mind. He thought of the raids and the battles, but also of the quiet moments. When he had seen kindness between strangers who had nothing to give, he began to question if loyalty to the crown was worth the suffering it caused. Alex and his fighters planned a new mission. This time, they aimed to cut the power to the Imperial command post. The risk was great because the building was heavily guarded. But striking at the heart of the occupation would send a message. They moved through the old sewer lines until they reached the underground cables. Using simple tools, they cut the main lines, and within minutes the command post went dark. Panic spread among the soldiers as lights went out and alarms failed. Adam rushed to restore order, but deep inside he felt a strange pull toward the courage of the resistance. He began to see Alex not as an enemy, but as a man fighting for his people. Queen Laura received the report with cold silence. She ordered more troops and harsher measures. She believed fear would bring obedience, yet she could feel that fear was slipping from her grasp. The more she tightened her control, the more the unrest grew in the tunnels.
Alex.
Listen to the news of the blackout spreading through the hidden networks. It was more than a small victory. It showed that the Empire could be hurt, and that the resistance could reach its most secure places. The fighters felt their hope grow stronger and even. In the darkness of the tunnels, there was a light in their hearts. Far away in the palace, the queen walked alone through the halls. Her thoughts were heavy as she considered the growing defiance among the worlds. She wondered if they would still stand with her, if the resistance on Earth could not be crushed. She told herself they would, yet for the first time, she was not certain. The first signs of change began in the outer colonies. Small protests grew into marches, and some governors refused to send soldiers too. Earth, the Empire was still strong, but its unity was beginning to break Queen Laura. Kane heard the reports and felt the weight of each one pressing against her rule. She spoke to her council with force demanding loyalty and warning of the danger if the rebellion was allowed to spread on Earth. The resistance moved quickly to use the unrest to their advantage. Alex Hunter gathered his fighters in the tunnels and explained that the time had come to strike harder than ever before. They planned to hit multiple targets at once to stretch the Empire's forces and show the people that the fight was far from over. Adam Pierce stood in the command post, looking at the maps. His orders were to crush the rebels, but his heart was no longer in the task. He remembered the faces of the people and the quiet courage he had seen in the streets. The more he thought of it, the less he could ignore the truth. The Empire had brought nothing but pain to Earth, and it was only right to end it. The first attack came at dawn, as resistance fighters hit a patrol station on the edge of the city. They moved in fast, disabling vehicles and driving the soldiers out. By midday, another group struck a supply yard, setting fire to the stockpiles meant for the Imperial troops. Smoke rose above the city, and the people watched from their doorways, feeling a spark of hope they had not known in years. Adam was sent to lead a counterattack against one of the resistance cells. Instead of crushing them, he ordered his men to pull back. He told his officers to spread word among the soldiers that they should not harm civilians and to avoid unnecessary fights. His quiet acts of defiance went unnoticed by the Queen, but they gave the rebels more room to move far away in the capital. The Queen faced growing anger from her own council. Some worlds were threatening to withdraw completely from the Empire. Unless the situation on Earth was resolved, she promised swift victory, yet deep inside she feared that the tide had already turned in the tunnels. Alex learned of Adam's actions from contacts in the city. At first he did not trust the reports, but soon he saw the truth. Imperial patrols were fewer, and the soldiers seemed less willing to fight. He realized that Adam might no longer be the enemy he once was. The resistance launched their largest attack yet, aiming at the main power station that supplied the Imperial command post. The battle was fierce and lasted through the night. Fighters moved through the smoke and dust, working together to take control of the building. When the lights of the city went out, the people knew the rebels had won another victory. Adam watched the blackout from the roof of the command post. He knew the Queen would see this as a disaster, but to him, it was a sign of what was coming. He began to make plans to bring his own men over to the side of the resistance. When the time came, he would stand with Earth against the Empire Queen. Laura received the news of the blackout in silence. She dismissed her advisors and stood alone in her chamber. She thought of the worlds that had once supported her without question and wondered how many still would if the rebellion spread further. She told herself she could still win, yet doubt had begun to grow in her mind. In the dark tunnels, Alex looked at the faces of his fighters. They were tired and bruised, yet their eyes held a fire that no defeat could put out. He told them the fight was not yet won, but the enemy was weakening. With every strike, they were bringing the day closer when Earth would be free, and the worlds that had once supported its chains would come to beg for forgiveness. The city stood in silence after the blackout. Only the dim light of the moon touched the broken streets. The people waited in their homes, unsure if the Empire would strike back with greater force. In the tunnels, Alex Hunter sat with his fighters, planning their next move. They knew the final battle was near, and that they would need every ally they could find. Adam Pierce moved through the city with a small group of loyal men, loyal now not to the Queen, but to the people. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back. He met Alex in a hidden chamber deep under the old subway lines. Their meeting was tense at first, but both men understood that unity was the only way forward. Adam promised to bring his soldiers to fight. Beside the resistance, when the time came far away in the capital, Queen Laura Kane stood before her council. She listened as more governors spoke against her rule. Some had already withdrawn their troops from Earth. Others were calling for peace talks to end the conflict. She rejected the idea of surrender and ordered every remaining loyal force to prepare for a final assault. The night before the battle, the people of Earth gathered in the ruins of their neighborhoods. Fires burned in barrels, and the sound of quiet voices carried through the air. They spoke of what freedom might feel like, and of the cost they were willing to pay to see it. The fighters checked their weapons, and the runners carried messages between different groups across the city. At dawn, the Empire struck. Columns of armored vehicles rolled into the streets, supported by soldiers in tight formation. The air shook with the sound of their approach, but the resistance was ready. From every side, fighters poured out from hiding, launching attacks on the advancing troops. The city became a battlefield as smoke rose, and the sound of gunfire filled the air. Adam led his men in open defiance of the Queen. He ordered them to shield civilians and push the Empire's forces back street by street. His knowledge of Imperial tactics allowed the resistance to counter every move. Alex fought alongside his people, never leaving the front lines. The two forces together began to turn the tide of the battle. Hours passed, and the fighting raged on. By afternoon, the Imperial lines began to crumble. Soldiers threw down their weapons and fled. Others joined the resistance on the spot as the will to fight for the Queen faded. Adam and Alex pushed forward, taking the command post at the heart of the city. The Imperial banner was pulled down and the people filled the streets in victory. Queen Laura received the news in her grand hall. The empire she had ruled for so long was breaking apart. Her advisors spoke of worlds refusing her orders and of fleets abandoning their post. For the first time, she felt the weight of defeat. She was taken into custody by members of her own guard, who no longer wished to follow her rule. In the days that followed, leaders from across the galaxy sent envoys to Earth. They came not with threats, but with offers of aid. They spoke carefully, asking for forgiveness for their part in supporting the enslavement of the planet. Some offered ships, some offered supplies, and others promised to rebuild what had been destroyed. Alex listened to each of them, but his answer was clear. Earth would never again bow to another world. The new Council of Earth would decide its own path, and no promise would erase the years of suffering. Adam stood beside him as they addressed the people together. They spoke of unity and strength born from struggle. The streets once filled with soldiers were now filled with citizens working to rebuild their homes. Children played in the open air without fear. The scars of the past would remain, but they would serve as a reminder of what had been won. Earth was free at last, and the worlds that had once supported its chains now stood in its shadow, asking for mercy.